today on Temple Talks with Alysia Pinter, and I'm really, really deeply inspired and excited about this interview. Alysia is an artist, natural healer, and guide who has endured many life experiences that have led to profound healing and personal evolution. For much of her life, trauma consumed her until 2018 when her healing journey began. Alysia's vision is to share her unique gifts, lived experiences, and the incredible ability to see, feel, and understand the other, intending to support the evolution and healing of all those she encounters. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, in that brief description, I can elaborate quite a bit. As you mentioned, I've been through quite a lot of experiences in my life that were quite traumatic, and I didn't really have much guidance or know my way until a few years ago. And during that time, since 2018, when I really began diving into the depths of those pains and aspects of myself that were so lost, I learned so many tools, which includes trusting and connecting to myself and learning to support and love myself. And since then, I've been able to really notice when I'm able to support others through their own journey that might be similar. I recognize that everybody's experience is different. However, when you've lived through difficult things, especially quite traumatic events, there's a synergistic experience that happens between two people. And I feel that everything that I've experienced and endured and survived has got me to this space to be able to help others to evolve through that pain and discomfort and confusion or grief, fear that would come from those lived experiences. And so my goal and what I love to do is be able to hold space for people to share intuitive insights and any kind of clarity that comes through that might be of service to them. Because I did also learn, of course, with the pandemic happening and everything, I was kind of forced into a situation where I had no choice but to be with myself. And it was nobody's doing but my own to sit with, heal, honor, and nurture those wounds. And I can't heal people, but I can provide substance for them to learn how to do it themselves. And so that combined with, the tools I've learned, my own unique gifts, I feel that I'm able to support people on their own journey, healing and empowerment and embodiment.
So right before this interview, we got into a really, really interesting conversation just around inner healing with our inner child and how important that is, especially when we are maybe moving through trauma or doing healing work connected to our parents. And, we were also talking about how our backgrounds can inform the work that we're doing now in terms of transforming our pain into medicine and using that to support others, right? From a place of lived experience versus, someone going and learning something through school that they've maybe never experienced before, right? And so I was hoping maybe, we could have a bit of a discussion around, just your background growing up and some of this work that you've done with healing with the inner child and also with the mother or father wound and how that's informed the work that you're doing now today.
Yeah. Well, inner child work is essential, and I had an understanding of it over the years, but it wasn't until last summer when I finally invested in myself and got a coach. It was an intuitive coach. She was so connected to my soul, I feel, and the way I learned to listen to my inner child and to notice when she was coming forward and to notice when she was seeking my attention or was in pain, that was what made all the difference. And I don't think that I would have made the progress that I have if I didn't learn how to nurture her. And it's not comfortable. And that's something I'm really stand for is like healing isn't easy and it's not comfortable and it can be really fucking messy, but it's so necessary and it's so rewarding. And when you get through um, when you get through to a version of yourself, and you actually feel the difference in energy within you when you nurture her or him, it literally removes a weight off of your shoulders, and luckily I had support during that first initial time to not stop myself when it became uncomfortable. And I was able to, for the first time, really pull out the fear and the guilt and the shame, and to be able to sit with her. And over time, when my time was done with my coach, I had to learn how to do that myself. And so I utilized those tools, like creating space, sitting down when you're feeling uncomfortable, if something's rising or you're triggered, and like being with it.
Where women thrive in sisterhood, sacred business, soul-led purpose, and sacred sexuality, the Queen's Council is a container devoted to the intimate magic of queenship, soul, sex, magic, and the goddess. Together we weave a coven to hold our wildest dripping pleasure as magic oozes from our souls, cascading into the world like the ambrosia nectar of the divine. If you're ready to become a confident, embodied woman running your feminine-led empire from a place of spaciousness, wild creativity, alignment, and pleasure, the Queen's Council is opening up applications. Experience a radical and loving relationship with money and prosperity, wildly thriving and living your visions for your most beautiful life. Because being a queen in your life means setting higher standards for your pleasure, your purpose, and prosperity. As a mystic, visionary artist, or healer here on the planet to shift the collective trajectory, you're ready for a massive shift internally in how you be in the world. So step into your queenship surrounded by other women who are setting a higher standard for how they create and manifest in the world. Applications open now, and we start in November.
Inner child work it's essential, and it wasn't until last year when I invested in myself and hired an intuitive coach to work with me that I was able to tools required to learn how to sit with, support, and nurture those versions of me who had experienced pain and suffering and trauma. And during my time working with my coach, I had support to push past the moments of discomfort where one would usually stop themselves, because the pain is too much or the fear of what would come up is too much. And through working with her, I was able to really hone in sorry, I'm in the jungle, what it feels like to really break through those barriers and to pull the guilt and the shame and the fear out. And when my time was done with her, I had nobody else but myself. And it was uncomfortable and it was scary and it's messy. And that's something I really want to teach people, is that healing it's messy, but it's essential and it's beautiful. And I learned how to hold my body and connect to that version of me and to nurture her and reparent her, because my upbringing was quite unstable. It was all over the place. My mom was an alcoholic and she wasn't abusive or anything, but it was emotionally it was disrupting me a lot emotionally, and we were moving constantly, and I had experienced traumas. And so I didn't have that family figure of authority, of security, of safety to nurture the versions of me. And it wasn't until now, 30 years later, that I've discovered how to do that. And I still meet resistance, and I still have a lot of troubles sometimes creating space to feel what's coming up and to pull out whatever feeling is rising. But especially if you're in a relationship, or even if you're not, but when you are, you meet those shadows, you meet those triggers, and you're going to explode on everybody else. You're going to be triggered by somebody else until you decide for yourself that you're going to take that control and take care of the things that need nurturing within, because otherwise it's running your show. And so I found that I've become so empowered by learning how to sit with it, learning how to love myself and build my self-worth and cry and grieve and feel through all the pain that rises. And with that, it's released so much weight off my shoulders.
Lisa, you mentioned something a little bit back around reparenting, and I'm wondering if you can like speak to what reparenting is, and then also like just maybe speak to how when we grow up with role models, or parents, right, they are the first template for our understanding of man, woman, mother, father, like the archetypes of divine masculine, divine feminine, and maybe speak to how that is reflected, like our relationship literally can, with them, or if they're not there, and how that affects relationships, and then how we can quote unquote reparent. Maybe if you can speak to that a little bit for those especially who aren't familiar with what reparenting is.
Yeah, of course. I think it's super important. And, I also think it's important to note that we're all learning and evolving through these new found insights and experiences. And what I've really learned is to be compassionate in the process of discovering these new topics, even like reparenting, which is essentially treating yourself the way maybe you never were treated, or giving yourself the love and the patience and the nurturing or guidance that you didn't receive that you should have. That could be as simple as walking by the dishes and being like, I'll just do them in the morning, versus no, just do them now. It's going to be done. You'll feel better tomorrow, right? Like that's a very basic example, but I think starting simple is the best way to start training yourself how to acknowledge what it is to reparent, what it is to create your life in a way that is structured and guided for your best success, right? And some might think, oh, it's just dishes, but if you can't do it for those little things, how are you going to support yourself for the bigger things, right? And if I'll lead into more of the emotional aspect of reparenting, I would say, when you're triggered by something, it's usually not your present self. Of course, your present self is experiencing it, but it's usually like your 7-year-old self who has an abandonment wound, or your 12-year-old self who got bullied, and what they need is somebody to console them and love them without judgment or shame or trying to fix it even, right? Some parents, I'm not one, but I have lots of children in my life. I'm maternal. I think we all can just imagine what that would be like, but we don't want to see the children in our lives hurt or suffering. So some parents just immediately go and try and fix it. But sometimes what you needed wasn't to be fixed. What you just needed was to be seen in your discomfort and to be held and to be supported. And, for me, I had quite a few traumatic experiences, but like one in specific, I was almost kidnapped. I got away, I was 7 years old. I ran home and nobody was there, but then my mom got there and, she comes in the door, and of course there's the fear, and that's so valid. But I look back in just this last year and was like, I didn't, get put in a bath and nurtured or asked how I felt, or get, put into counseling or some kind of support. And, I'm not saying she did anything wrong, but that version of me needed to feel safe and needed to see how I was doing and needed to just be held and not have somebody else's emotion over my experience taken over. Right. And so the version of me now who discovered what that wound is, which is the feeling of not being safe, or the feeling of my emotions not being put first when the experience happened to me, I get to call her forward and cry for the grief that might be inside from feeling maybe emotionally. Of course, that wasn't my mom's intention. Fuck, that would be so scary. but that's what my experience was, so reparenting is noticing that my fear in some areas of the world, as a woman, especially being alone, traveling and stuff, that might come from not being cared for when a very scary experience happened. So I get to create space and maybe journal, or simply just hold her and talk to her and tell her she's safe, and maybe run her a bath, right? So it's like recreating scenarios in a way that you need it, and treating
Mm,
yourself in that way.
that's so beautiful. That really sounds to like there's a similar Toltec tradition. They talk about Toltec shamanism, and they talk about recapitulation, where it's you reclaim the power that was lost in certain situations growing up in your life, and it's a way to kind of again reclaim the power that you gave away, or, or that was taken from you. And so you can go back and make a list of like all of those key experiences in your life growing up, which is really powerful. So, when you're doing that healing work with your inner self, and also those memories, bringing it back to the present moment, there's so many people that I know of, and this has been my experience personally, where, if you have a parent, but they're not in your life, for various reasons, like how do you reconcile that inner healing with, either the mother or the father, right? Especially if we're doing that inner child healing work, we want to heal our relationship to the inner masculine, inner feminine, and we need to look firstly to those templates. Like, I'm just curious to hear what your experience has been in healing or reconciling, or even being at peace with something being unresolved in the relationship with our parents.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like I'm a good example to ask because, and I know you know a bit about my story, but for those who don't, like, as I mentioned earlier, my mom is an alcoholic, and she became sober 5 years ago, which is incredible. However, her reaching her 1 year sobriety, it actually threw me into a dark depression, because it was the first time in my life that I realized that I was the child of an alcoholic parent, even though I knew, but like I didn't know, and so it was like my life flashed before my eyes. And with that, my own traumas and my own things started rising, and unintentional resentments or pain or distrust towards her have become present, right? And so she's become years now into her healing journey, which also means her own traumas are being revealed, which is why she was an alcoholic, right? And then she's seeking my love, and I can't seem to give it, because now I've discovered all of these things were the result of my mom's alcoholism. And it's very complex, and it's created such a strain in our relationship. We're estranged at this point, and a perfect example of having to learn how to become at peace with the fact that we're not in communication. And I've just moved out of the country. I don't know when or if I'll be back, given the circumstances. I don't know. And it's the first time in my life where she doesn't know, and we're not in communication, and I'm having to change my role as like the caregiver, and the one that is like the people pleasing within the relationship, because of maybe her reactivity, or just the dynamic we've had because of our relationship growing up. And so I'm in this place where I'm having to finally honor myself and protect myself. And I'm evolving in my work and in my own personal development. And I know how debilitated I get when she might snap, or when we have a conflict, and it triggers all my wounds, and so I can't function. And that's something I'm working on. But when it's so deeply rooted, it's also something I can't risk. And so I'm in this position, and it's very fresh, especially because the way our relationship has been the last year and the last 6 months, where for the first time in my life, I'm in this position of not giving in and not feeding in, and not just simply forgiving and jumping back into our relationship because of my fear of her actions towards herself, or how she might react or respond. And it comes with a lot of grief and lots of fucking anger, and it's really important to feel those things when they come up, because it's all the versions of you inside, whatever your experience is, that are feeling it, right? I have my 5-year-old self, my 7-year-old self, my 16-year-old self, my 21, my 30-year-old self, all of them at the same time confused on what's right, confused and guilty. I feel guilty. I feel fearful. I don't know what's right. And what I think everybody can take from this, regardless of circumstances or the relationship, is that what's right is what comes from love. And if me giving in and repeating a cycle and allowing certain behaviors happens again, that's coming from fear, that's coming from trying to grasp onto something that isn't serving me or her at this time, right? And putting the self first is also first, because I recognize how painful it is to accept that. However, if it's going to cause both of us to become unable to function because we're in so much pain, it's not serving us. So I suppose the ways that I'm navigating that is being vulnerable and being real with how I'm feeling. And when the grief comes up, I purge it. And, I'm really grateful to have a partner who can hold that space and understands in his own ways. And it all comes down to being present with yourself and nurturing all those versions of self who are experiencing the pain and the fear and the anger and the grief and the sadness, so much sadness, and uncertainty. But all you can do is take care of yourself so that you can nurture your nervous system, so that you can function in a way that allows you to get your foundation built so that you can be okay. And unfortunately, that doesn't include my mother at this time. And, I never had a father. I mean, I had one. I'm here. But, I never met him either and never even saw a photo. And then last year I find him. However, he is deceased 4 years ago, right? So, I feel blessed in some weird way that, it's not like I knew him, then he was gone. It was like I never knew him. But in discovering his passing, I grieved the fact that I won't ever know him, right? And so I've had to be at peace with that too. And I'm seeing for the first time the resiliency and self-awareness, and also, the patterns that I've continued to perpetuate because of my upbringing, and to break those cycles. And I feel a lot of people are breaking a lot of cycles right now is fucking hard.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said around like what is right is what comes from love, and as someone's navigating the journey of doing that inner healing with their inner child and also with the relationship with their parents, regardless or not whether they can be transformed externally, there is a choice that someone gets to make, whether they choose to heal how they emotionally relate to that parent. And it doesn't have to be physically, but it's just in how we live our lives, or if we let that destroy us. My stepfather killed himself, and he had been struggling with alcohol for his entire life. And his father, it turned out, had committed suicide when he was a child. And so he was dealing with the grief of that. And instead of being able to, and I think too, generationally, I think that, certain generations, they only have a certain amount of tools available. Like, in my own journey, it's interesting. I've just, in the last couple of years, discovered my father and have been doing, that healing work, which has been interesting because he doesn't want to get into anything to do with emotions or anything to do with the past. And so it's been really hard for me to even like scratch the surface to get into that stuff. One thing we did was I had a friend channel my father so I could actually have a real conversation with him about like, Dad, you've still never talked about these things. And what came through in the channeling was that, and it was channeled through a friend of mine, was that my dad felt deep shame, like the shame that a parent has for not being a good parent is, I think it's up there with like all of the other major sins that you can commit on the planet, and so to be, and I think that that's where a lot of parents struggle, especially when their children are coming to them to try and initiate a healing.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they must be struggling with the internalized shame, which will come out through outbursts, right? So,
Yeah.
and now, like, I don't know, you're one of the most amazing women I know, and you've done some,
Mm-hmm.
like, your life really is a testament to that work that you've done, but it must have been scary though. Like, it's probably been
Mm.
just terrifying to address the feelings that do come up. Like,
Yeah.
um, can you share maybe a one or two practices that you've used to deal with the anger or the rage that it has come up?
Mm. Yeah. It's very interesting because I feel like the part that has been the scariest has been the feelings of being misunderstood, even by those close to me, right? Because, for example, within the relationship with my mom, you know, nobody's ever actually understood what I've had to experience or how it felt. And, most people don't not like most people have more than one parent or family member, right? Like I've got a sister, of course. That's not a parent or a grandparent or something. And the scariest part was just like even if I wanted to try and talk to somebody, there was no point, because or it felt that way because having somebody be like, well, what's the problem? Like, oh, all families are hard. It just like makes me so fucking mad, because I was like, oh, yes, I know that, but like, no, it's different, and people minimize a lot because, oh, we all have troubles. It's like, yeah, but everybody's experiencing a different thing in the same storm, um, and so when I did have to sit with it all over a period of time, it was scary to have the realizations of the amount of times that I've perhaps abandoned myself and the amount of times that I've continued to have relationships that hurt me and allowed that, right? Because I didn't understand that it was coming from that. And it's hard because my mom also, like, every mom loves their child, but like my mom really loved me, and I know she does, but I've never not felt her love. Even when things were hard, it's like she was always hugging me and kissing me and telling me I love you, right? And so it didn't look like it was painful and it didn't look like it was hard. And that was what was most frustrating. And so this last few years of like discovering all these things and having to sit with it and feel the pain and feel the versions of me crying, like literally the only thing I could do is allow myself to just fall on the floor and let it out. And then I started like screaming into things and like my bed and literally just like releasing so much energy. And I remember the first time I let myself, wasn't even a letting, it was like it was just happening. The first time to really release,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like, no, this is just happening, you're doing it. It was like I sobbed and it was like this most powerful like screams of cries coming out of me, and I could have flashes of memories and hurt, and I just literally sat and held myself. And another process that allowed me to get through that was like this one day, I think I must have been just like channeling my higher self because I began writing down all the things I've experienced in my journal that were really traumatizing and toxic and have caused me pain. And it was pages. And I was like, whoa, I have experienced so much that I literally can't believe that anybody could have hurt me this way. I can't believe that I could have survived all of this. And it was like this big epiphany of just, wow, that is so terrifying and it is so scary. And it's scarier to have not acknowledged it and not have felt it. And to discover that I was holding all of that all of this time and I had no idea was so overwhelming. And I remember sitting there and it was like the first time I had held myself and acknowledged everything. It was like all versions of me got to be seen for the first time and all versions of me got to be heard. And it was really scary. And it was really scary to like be lost in that dark night of the soul. But then after, it was like all these blessings started coming through. And I felt so empowered for being able to provide myself with that space and to be patient with myself, to sit through that pain and
Mm.
to just let it happen. Like it just happened,
there's something coming through where it's like you have to understand the boundaries that were crossed in order to understand where your boundaries are now.
Mm.
Because
Yes.
really, like, the healing with our inner child is really, and I've seen this too as well in my own life and in clients' lives where, boundaries get crossed because you literally don't know where your boundaries are. And boundaries
Mhm.
are to keep you safe. Boundaries are like the things that you have, whether it's physical boundaries or emotional boundaries, they're things that protect you. And everyone should have an understanding of what their boundaries are, right? In relationships, that
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
know how we're operating. And hey, if a boundary's been crossed, you can communicate. But if boundaries get crossed, especially as children, over and over and over again, um, it's literally very hard for people to even understand boundaries, right? And then that's where you see, like, so it almost sounds like really understanding and going back, when you're going back in your journal, to understand what boundaries were crossed and the things that you went through, so you can
Mhm.
actually develop and be like, okay, now we're not opening up space ever again for that kind of, behavior or experience, right? Would you say that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it also helped me understand, even though it was hard to see and it was hard to go back to things and to feel the things that were rising, but it
Yeah.
helped me see, like, oh, well, this is why I've had no self-worth. This is why I didn't feel beautiful. This is why I made myself small. This is why I allowed toxic behavior or started doing drugs or drinking alcohol. It's like it all made sense.
Mm.
And I think with anything, whether it's like a severe trauma or like a simple habit, it's the actual awareness of the experience or the situation or the thought pattern or the limiting belief that can transmute and alchemize it, right? So I think in seeing it all, it was just like these puzzle pieces were put together, and then the unfolding happened, right? And yeah, it helped me to see boundaries, and it helped me to see, like, oh, none of those some of those things really weren't my fault. And it made me understand my behavior and other people's behavior, right? And yeah, yeah, it's really interesting to create that space.
Mm. And as, like, too, in the healing journey, so, like, you move through, like, trauma and pain, and releasing grief and releasing emotion, right? And part of that is giving yourself permission to even feel those things, right? That most people spend their entire lives running from in order to not feel them. Then we kind of start to move into the spectrum, and Abraham Hicks talks about this, right? It's like the emotional spectrum. Then we can start to get into, like, the pleasure, the play, the happiness. And
Mm.
you're a visual artist, right? So you
Mhm.
incorporate a lot of artistic practice into your work. Would you say that you're tapping into your inner child a lot of times when you're, like, flowing, or is it your inner,
Mm.
like, yeah, can you maybe just share the connection there between them?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. I never thought about like who I'm connecting to when I'm creating. I definitely create the most and the most epic pieces like when I'm in a very emotionally distraught place or when I'm suffering.
Really?
Even just a few weeks ago when this stuff with my mom happened, like my partner was like, let's go to the art store. I hadn't done art in 9 months, which being an artist, that means something is not right for me at least. And, I was able to create like this epic piece that I've never done before, brand new style. And I almost feel like it's maybe that's like the reparenting version of me because it's like, oh, you're feeling this uncomfortable feeling. Well, sweetie, let's go play. And then I'm releasing it. I'm taking that pain away and putting it onto this beautiful masterpiece. So it's like I've turned this messy, muddy, dark energy into like something beautiful. Um, and I mean, the parts of me that are the inner child is like, I don't wear gloves. I don't give a shit if I get paint on everything. I ruined my last desk. Like there was paint everywhere. Like I love being dirty and painting and touching the textures. And I definitely get lost for hours. Like last summer when I was really in the darkness, I would paint for like 14 hours straight.
Mm. Oh my gosh, what you just shared, to, like, turning mess into art, isn't it, like, beautiful, like, to transform and look back on the things in one's life that, someone could look at as, like the shit, and really, like, look at it as being like this fucking sculpted me into this amazing person I am today. Like, shit, you know what I mean? Right? And like, how can we do that and look at ourselves as like these masterpieces now? You know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, whether it's through expression or how we carry ourselves or our language changes, right? Like, just like if you start hanging with a new group of friends, kind of take on new words and stuff, right? Like, as you evolve and you shift and you become more in alignment with yourself and your authenticity and, you know, what you're passionate about, your energy changes, your aura changes, your style changes. Even if it's still same, it's a little different. And that's like alchemy, right? That's transmutation.
Ah, so beautiful. Alysia, I could talk to you about this stuff for hours. Like, this has been so
It's so nice. It's
such
fun.
a rich experience. And I'm just wondering, like, you work with people in helping them see and transform the way that they look at their lives from being a mess to a masterpiece. So can you just share a little bit more about how people can find out about the work that you do, you know, where they can find you?
Working one-on-one, I really like to incorporate the basics of human design and astrology, because if anybody doesn't know about what that is yet, it's really this wormhole, but even just the basics really helps understand the dynamic of a specific person. And I think it's really important to remember that everybody is different and unique. And for me personally, it's changed my life and how I move forward and how I create and how I'm building my business. So I feel like it's really valuable to be able to create such unique spaces for people because everybody's different. I also have my website, artsyyogi.ca, which is, you know, where my art is and some more information about me. And you could reach me on either. And
thank you so much for sitting down here with me today and sharing just more about your perspective on, you know, transformational artistry and healing inner child and reparenting. It's been just really enlivening. I think that these are the conversations of our times, especially as a collective. You know, we really need to be collectively doing this work together so that we can just like live in the new earth, right? And enjoy it. So thank you again so much, Alysia. And
thank you for creating this space. I love you.